So hello and welcome to our grad school Q&A. We're so glad you could all be here. I'd like to start by thanking the UCCS English Department and the T. Rowe Price Career and Innovation Center for co-sponsoring this event. We're going to start by taking about 20 minutes to share some information, and then we'll be opening it up for questions and conversation. So while my co-host and I are speaking, feel free to share any questions or thoughts in the chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. And then when we open up the floor, we'll invite you to either use your digital hand, to raise your digital hand and ask a question, or to share questions in the chat. I'm going to begin by sharing some basics of how graduate school works, and then my co-host will go into more details about finding graduate programs, applying for them, and graduate programs that may interest majors. But before we get into that, I'd like to introduce you to your hosts. My name is Dr. Ann Amakuchi. I'm a faculty member in the English department, and I'm joined by Dee Johnson. Dee is our UCCS graduate recruitment specialist, and my gosh, Dee, we in the English department are so grateful to you for being willing to share your time and your expertise with us this evening. So
Yes.
thank you. I've just shared a link in the handout, a link in the chat to a handout that contains a glossary of some terms that we'll use during the session that you might find helpful. So to start us off, let me just speak briefly to what it means when you hear the term graduate school. So after you've earned a bachelor's degree, which is also called an undergraduate degree, you're eligible to apply for graduate programs. And typically, the next step after a bachelor's degree is a master's program. A master's program is an advanced course of study. It typically takes 2 to 3 years to complete. And there are lots of different types of master's programs. You're going to hear about some of them from Dee, but probably the two most common you'll hear people talk about in the field of English are an MA, which stands for a Master of Arts, or an MFA, which stands for a Master of Fine Arts. So when someone earns an MA degree, they might work with that degree, or they might continue on in their education to earn a PhD, which is also called a doctoral degree. If someone earns an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts, they typically don't continue in their education in that area because an MFA is considered what's called a terminal degree, meaning it's the highest level of education you can receive in a possible field. And if you're just joining, I've shared in the chat a link to a handout. I'll share it again in case you didn't see it when you joined. And that has some terms on it we'll be referring to. So the second thing I want to talk about briefly is the idea of funding in graduate school. So some students pay for a graduate degree just like you would pay for an undergraduate degree, either by paying for tuition outright or by taking out loans. But some graduate programs offer funding. And what this means is that some universities will offer the opportunity for you to work for the university in exchange for the university paying for some or even all of your tuition. And when you have this kind of arrangement, this type of job is called an assistantship. It might involve teaching for the university or doing research or doing some other type of academic work. So an assistantship not only can really help you financially in a graduate program by helping to pay for some or even all of your tuition, but it can also give you valuable work experience. So say you're on a path where you want to head for a teaching career, getting a teaching assistantship would give you the chance to gain teaching experience while you're working toward a master's degree. Now, there are two things I'd want you to know about funding in graduate programs. So even when graduate programs offer full assistantships, which means a program pays for all of your tuition, there still are costs to the student. So the student still pays for things like fees and books and sometimes some other costs. And we would also want you to know that assistantships typically only pay you a stipend during 9 months of the academic year, and it's typically not enough to live on. So it's very common for graduate students to have additional employment in addition to an assistantship. You'll see on that handout that I linked in the chat that a full assistantship often involves working 20 hours a week, and a partial assistantship usually involves working less than that. So third thing I'll touch on is the GRE exam. So many of you took ACT or SAT tests when you were applying to enter your undergraduate degree, and some graduate schools also require an admissions test, and this test is called the GRE. Now, I would want you to know not all graduate schools require it, and in fact, more and more are starting to not require the GRE. So as you start looking into graduate programs, you'll want to see if the ones you're interested in even require this exam. If they don't, it won't be necessary for you to take it. In Graduate programs in English, they might require what's called the GRE General Test, which has three sections, a section on verbal reasoning, one on quantitative reasoning or math, and one on analytical writing. Now, I mentioned math, and I know we're all English people, but I would want you to know that if you're going into a humanities graduate program, your score on the math portion of that test is not nearly as important as your score on the verbal and writing portions of the test. If you're applying for graduate programs that require this GRE exam, people who are taking this exam typically prepare for it through prep books and practice tests. And it's also common to take the exam more than once if you want to work toward a higher score. But I will note that the exam, of course, has a cost. And so that sometimes limits how many times a person can take it. And like I mentioned, not all programs require the GRE. And finally, I'll just say a few things about dates before I pass it over to Dee. So when you're applying for graduate programs, especially if you're interested in applying for one of those assistantships that I mentioned, you're going to apply pretty early. So you might be applying in December to start a graduate program in the following fall. If you're not applying for funding, you can apply closer to the time when the program starts. So you might be applying in spring or even summer to start a program in the fall. And there are even some programs that have rolling admissions that let you apply at any time during the year. Really, and you're going to hear this from Dee also, the key is to start early. So if you're applying for an assistantship even earlier, Dee is going to talk about some of the different materials that you'll put together to apply to graduate school. And so something you'll want to be thinking about this evening is if you were interested in starting a graduate program next fall, now would be the time to start researching different programs. All right, I know that's sort of some quick, fast information. Dee is going to go into a lot more details, so I will now pass it over to her. Thank you, Dee.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Hope that's okay. I call you Anne. Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Deanna, and I'm gonna apologize in advance if you hear my dogs barking in the background. They've been a little wild today, being home with me. So I apologize in advance. I'll try to mute really quick if they're locked out of the bedroom that I'm in right now. So, like Anne said, I work here at UCCS as a graduate recruitment specialist. And I know that some of you are probably right now trying to figure out what your next steps are in terms of graduate school. And as you know, like UCCS doesn't have a master's in English or an MFA, but there are still options for you depending on kind of what you want to do as a career. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to like prepare for the application and then just some different options for for programs here at UCCS that you might be interested in. So let me get and Anne is going to monitor the chat. I mentioned before anybody got on here that I unintentionally usually neglect the chat. So I will let her stop me if there are any questions. So let me get this shared here. And I'll just ask for a thumbs up, maybe, Anne, to make sure
Yep.
you can see. Okay, perfect. So this was taken, we did an event probably a couple months ago in the spring, and it was called Stepping on the Road to Graduate School. Some of you may have attended this event in the Career Center. If not, we're going to be doing another event next week. Talks about a little bit about research, but I will also be at that event. So if you want to stop by and chit chat about graduate school, please feel free. I'll send that to Anne after this so she can include that. But a lot of times students are thinking they don't really know how to start, or they are not sure even where to look, what to do, or that maybe they have just started talking about graduate school, and that's okay. So wherever you are in your journey, it's okay. Just know that everybody's process is a little bit different. And determining if you want to even go to graduate school is something that you personally have to decide. And there are some factors that go into that too. So if you're not sure where to start, I usually tell students there are 4 steps, and I have a handout that I will share as well. So I'm going to briefly go over these. The first one is to just think about if graduate school is something that you actually want to do. And so this could include thinking about your current, like if you're working does your prospective job need a master's degree? Do you have a family? Is it the right time for you and your family? Finances are also a big thing to think about while you are thinking about if you want to go to graduate school or not. So just think about, does this align with my goals in life? Does this align with my career goals, family goals, or personal goals and things like that? So just begin to think about it. The second step is just to research and explore. And I know that this sounds really silly, but I always tell students to literally open up a Word document on your computer and open up Google at the same time and just do a search for a specific program that you're interested in. So if it's, say you want to do an MFA, do a quick Google search for MFA programs and start looking through those. And if you find one that is interesting to you, just save it on your computer and just save it so that way you can go back to it quickly. You don't have to like go through the whole process of like finding it again, doing the search. You can pull up the Word document. You can take notes on application requirements and things like that. I know that sounds really silly, but it's effective. So that's a good tactic. So just begin to research and explore graduate schools. Some things to think about as you're doing that is the length of the program. So how long is it going to take you to actually complete the program? And a lot of times websites will include some type of like curriculum guide or advising guide to help you kind of see, okay, is this a 2-year program? Is this a 3-year program? They'll probably also will include some classes that you're going to take as well. Are you going to have to do a thesis? Are you going to have to do a big project? All of that will usually be included on programs' websites. So that's just something to be thinking about. Another thing to think about is geographic location. So if you are you prepared to move or are you looking for online programs? So that way you could stay in Colorado Springs and work at the same time. So just some different things to think about as well. And cost is always one. And Anne mentioned assistantships, which I definitely think is something every student should think about. In addition to assistantships, there are a lot of graduate level scholarships that not many people apply for. So just be sure to make sure you like check out scholarships and ensuring that the deadline you meet those deadlines. What the bulk of this presentation is going to be about is actually preparing to apply to graduate school. So preparing for to do your actual application and updating your materials to ensure that you're ready to go. You're ready to submit your application. And then the last step is to apply. So I'm going to jump right into the next part of this. So preparing for graduate school can be require a lot of hard work and determination. And so it's always important to make a roadmap depending on for what your goals are. So if you know that your application is you're going to need letters of recommendation. Do you have people that you can go to get recommendations, or do you know that you have to take the GRE? So just to be mindful that, sometimes the GRE, it could take months to get your scores back. So do you need to plan in advance to take the GRE so that way you have your scores in time for the application? Are there any prereqs that you have to have? So does the class require a certain level of writing class or things like that? And that usually will always be listed on the websites that you look at and that you're going to make a Word document and start saving those things. So just some things to start thinking about. The thing is just keep going. It's going to feel like keep driving. So the theme of our presentation was like the roadmap. So just keep driving your car and just, keep going and doing your research. So just to caution you, letters of recommendation are coming and they are ahead of you. Most applications for graduate school do require some type of of recommendation or reference. So here are some suggestions and this is like something that gets students caught up all the time. I get emails probably weekly from prospective students of how many, like, who do I contact for my references or who can I use? Well, I don't have anyone. So you're in a good spot right now. If you're still in school, you're in a great spot because you are in classes right now and you can start building relationships with your professors that you can potentially use for references later. So just continue to build positive relationships with your professors. This could be anything between, from like your supervisor at work. Maybe you have like a very specific job that is in your career field, site, or realm. That person would be a great person to use for a letter of recommendation. Like I said, practicum professors, practicum supervisors, internship supervisors are all good people. Sometimes your application will be very specific and say we want one instructor, one supervisor. So just pay attention to that when you're looking at schools too. This is also going to sound silly, but your professors will hopefully thank me for this. Just go to class. Um, I know that that sounds like really silly to say, but going to class really shows that shows your professors that you care, and that you're interested in the topic. And even though you might not be as interested in that specific class, I challenge you to find something in that class that you're going to take out of the class. So find something that you're going to hook on to, and remember that. So just go to class, be kind to your professors, talk to them. I know that this sounds silly, but it's all part about building relationships. That way, when you do have to go ask for letters of recommendation, it's going to be a lot easier conversation to go up to a professor that you have a good relationship with to ask them for a letter of recommendation than to one that you maybe skipped their class a few times, or you like didn't go to office hours, or maybe you didn't communicate with them in class. So just some things to be mindful, and just stay in touch with your people. So even if you're going to maybe you take a gap year, stay in touch with your professors even after you graduate so they remember who you are. And that way it's easier to ask for letters of recommendation later. The second part of this, and I'll be honest that usually the Career Center will present on this slide, so I have a little bit of career training, but just some basics for preparing your resume or your CV. So most of the time, an application will ask for that information, and it's really just a way for you to tell your story, your academic journey, your professional journey as well. And there are different things. So, like, you want to show off the work. So maybe you have some publications, or maybe you have worked on a writing project or something, some type of project in your English classes that you can use and put that on your resume, because nothing really is off limits in your resume. I mean, there are some things we want to be appropriate, obviously, but you really want to highlight the work that you've done. Soft and hard skills are also great. Make sure you proofread your resume, and the Career Center will actually proofread your resume for you and read over it. You just drop it in a box outside their office, and they'll email you with updates, like with edits that you should make. So definitely something you should take advantage of, because most applications will ask for some type of resume or CV. Personal statement is also something that students get really freaked out about. And I will say, as English majors, I would assume you guys are all wonderful writers. So I think that this probably is something that you all will excel in. But if you do need help, you can always go to the and that is spinning, which I didn't realize that it spun like that. So I'm really sorry. It's kind of distracting. Okay. But the Excel centers on campus are always great to review your personal statements. And usually with personal statements, they will actually give you the prompt in your personal statement that they want you to write about. So they'll give you questions, or they also might ask you to submit a writing sample as well. So I would maybe have some things in your back pocket of these are some things that they're going to ask me to submit. So maybe pick out a few papers that you know you did really well on. Just make sure you still have access to those and that you remember where they are. Because when it's time to submit your application, it's very stressful when you can't find something that you need. So just keep a file. That way you have those documents as well. Let's see. And I'll give you I know that I've gone over just a little bit, and I'm really sorry, Anne. But I will give a personal example of this.
We have
Um,
plenty of time, Dee. You're
okay.
fine. Take your time.
Um,
Thank you.
so so I just started the PhD program here at UCCS in the College of Education, and I had to submit a writing sample for my master's program, and I finished my master's program in 2017. So I had to go through all of my files and find my thesis project and all those things. So just keep a file. Just remember where you put things is my another piece of advice. Small piece, but helpful piece. Okay, so as you know, like we don't have a specific English degree program here at UCCS, but there are a lot of options. So here are some just me doing some brainstorming today, and my English professors, you guys can probably add to this list. That's why I put a non-exclusive list of ideas. This is just me thinking of some different things that as English majors, what you might be interested in. So you could potentially do programs in journalism, create literature, creative writing, linguistics, education, publishing, political science, rhetoric and composition, media and film studies, grant writing, teaching, public administration, history, law school, or any research-based programs. Because a lot of those research-based programs are very heavy on writing a thesis or a dissertation if you do a PhD program. So that also could be very interesting if the research is interesting to you. Anything that's like a research-based program will probably be a great fit as well, if it fits into your like career. So those are just some ideas. And like I said, this is a non-exclusive list. So really um it's very open. English is a very diverse degree that can be used in a lot of different ways. And so there were a few programs at UCCS that I thought, okay, maybe this might be if you enjoy writing, or like the creative type works. Here are some degrees that at UCCS that we have that you might be interested in. We do have an alternative licensure program. So if you're interested in teaching and don't have the teaching component with your degree right now, the alternative licensure program takes about a year, and that gives you a certification licensure to teach in Colorado, grades 7 through 12. And you can select a specific like concentration area. So English language arts is one of those. So you can do that. We also potentially have a curriculum and instruction degree, which is just 2 additional courses from the alternative licensure program. So if you're able to take the 2 additional courses and get the degree, I would do that. If you enjoy working in student affairs, like if you were in, maybe you have an on-campus job right now, you want to work at a college level, in student affairs, our SAHI program would be a great option. Communications and history are always two that our communications program can really be tailored to specific interest areas, and it's 100% online. So if you're thinking that you want to move or work, go straight into the workforce, also a great option. I put public administration on here for the grant writing piece of public administration, and then the communication between like local government. I mean, I got my degree in public administration, so maybe I'm a little biased with this, but there is a lot of communication elements to public administration in terms of like public affairs. There could be like public affairs officers. I've seen jobs like that. Communication officers and things that work for local and state governments, that need people that are good at communicating and good at writing. And so also grant writing is a huge thing. And so knowing how to write cohesively and then also form the grant paperwork is a big thing. So we do have some certificates as well that are only 12 hours, 12 to 15 hours, depending on what you want to do. But grant writing and management, and then nonprofit management and public management were some that I thought might be decent options. And again, this was just me like thinking through our programs that we have now as options. So I'm happy to talk about any of those more in depth if we need to. But this is just my last page. If you have questions, please email me. I'm happy to set up a time to meet with you. I'm on campus. I can be on campus almost any day. So if I'm not traveling, so I'll work with you. And then we usually post our events in Mountain Lion Connect. So if you have any questions, you can just let me know. So that is all I have. Let me unshare.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Dee. This is a
You're
wealth of
welcome.
information. We both recognize that we are throwing a lot of information
Yeah.
at all of you, and so we want to open it up now for some conversation. Uh, Really, we mean it when we say there is no such thing as a silly question, because anything that's on your mind right now, I guarantee, is something that we were wondering at one point too. So if you've got questions or even thoughts you'd like to share, would you either raise your digital hand and I'll call on you, or share your question in the chat. And then we also have several faculty who are on the call. And please know, faculty, we also welcome you to share thoughts, pieces of advice, anything you'd like to.
And yes, faculty, if you have any other any ideas, where we don't have an English program at UCCS, sometimes I'm like, oh no. So I was just trying to go through our list. So, and I did not major in English, not my strongest suit. So if you guys have any suggestions, please chime in as well.
Okay, we've got our first question from Shruti. Thank you so much, Shruti. And she says, thank you so much for an informational presentation. I was wondering what are some of the opportunities on campus for us to build our academic degree? I'll start first and share a few thoughts, and then I imagine Dee will have others.
Okay.
Specifically, if you're interested in working specific to English, the Multiliteracy Center is a great place to apply for jobs. So they hire tutors who help students with both writing and oral communication projects. They provide a lot of training, and so that can be a good option to look into.
Mhm.
But I would also say that any campus job broadly, and Dee will
Mhm.
have other ideas, but any campus job is going to give you such a valuable experience in
Mhm.
interpersonal communication, just about any job you're involved in. And then a lot of them will involve writing. Dee, are there specific areas on campus you might share?
I like I said, I think what you said is perfect. The definitely multi-literacy center is great. I would say any type of club or organization that you can be involved in that you could potentially like maybe have a leadership position that tailors towards your career goals or I think of accounting sometimes like sometimes student clubs I use this example someone talking to business majors so like if you um say you join a club and they need a treasurer for it, like that keeps count of money. That would look great on a CV if you're applying to accounting programs, or because it shows that you have some experience, even though it's with a student club. So I would say any type of student club is great to show your involvement on campus. I would also, if you are interested in doing like research based things, and I think there's one question about internships, so this might touch on that a little bit. Our research center, sometimes there will be researchers on campus that need help, like proofreading papers or, different things like that. So just some options. But yeah, I think too, like building your CV can sometimes feel challenging because you don't know might not know what to put on there or how much to put on there. And the Career Center is great. They will take something really small and turn it into very like a really impactful thing. So even if you feel like maybe I shouldn't put this on there or um maybe this isn't as important, I would say it probably is important. So don't be afraid. And you can also ask them to review it too. Um, so that way, they can help you.
I would agree. And just building off of that, sometimes having a conversation with someone at the Career Center, like Dia is saying, will help you identify things you're doing that do show leadership abilities or writing and speaking or research
Mhm.
abilities that you can add to your CV. I'm also sharing a few links in the chat. So Dee mentioned research. Thank you. There are a couple
Mhm.
opportunities to get involved in research on campus. And two are the Undergraduate Research Academy and Mountain Line Research Day. So Mountain Line Research Day, any students can present their research. Maybe you're working on something this semester in a class, or you've got
Mhm.
something from a previous class. And so I've shared the link there. And by the way, anybody who has questions about these research things, feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk one-on-one
Yeah.
more about them. I'll go to our next question, but if others have other thoughts in response to Shruti, please let us know if you'd like to share. So Stephanie asks, I haven't done an internship. Will that hurt my chances of entering a grad program? Dee, would you take that one?
Yeah, I don't think so. It depends, and it kind of depends on the program itself. So, like, if on the application it says like experience in certain areas, or if it specifically wants you to have an internship, which I personally have never seen that for, I mean, I could see that on maybe a job posting that they say they want like a certain number of years of experience. Um, you could use an internship, but I know that our program, like for our programs here at UCCS, I don't know of a program that has some like that would look at and say, oh, she hasn't done her internship, so we're going to count her out. Now, they are very helpful. So I'm not discounting how important they are because I do think it gives you some of that real life, like real world practice for what you want to do. Um, so yeah, when are you, Stephanie, when are you graduating?
And everybody, Stephanie's mic isn't working, so she'll answer in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of putting you on the
No,
spot too. I can also send you information privately too if you don't want to answer out to all of us.
she's typing.
Okay.
Oh, she already graduated December
Oh,
2023.
okay, perfect. So
Congratulations.
yes, congratulations. So if you have already graduated, you know, you number one, you still have access. I agree. I am supportive of that. So the Career Center as an alumni, you still have access to the Career Center. And it's a free service still. They do like lunch hours. So if you have like your lunch break, or you can schedule an appointment with them after hours, I believe. So they're really good at taking, maybe you're not like for instance, like maybe you're not working in the field that you want to be working in, but they could take the job that you are doing and your current job responsibilities and phrase those in a way that gives you the skills that you might need for a job, right? That some like, and it's not like you're not faking it. It's just their list. They're saying it just in a different way, to help you like for that to be more like a little bit more like marketable. So I don't necessarily think that not having it in like not having internship is to count you out. Don't think that. Hopefully that helps. Felt like I was kind of talking in circles a little bit there, but
Stephanie's giving you multiple thumbs up.
okay. Okay. Yeah. So
And
definitely, sorry, I was gonna say definitely reach out to the Career Center. They can really help.
And I'll just add one more thought on the internship question. I agree with Dee, an internship is invaluable, but don't disregard other work experience. So
Yes.
any work experience is invaluable. If you've
Yes.
worked as a server, if you've worked in retail, if you've worked somewhere on campus, any type of job is something that is going to give you a leg up and shows the experience you have. So I agree with Dee, having a
Yeah.
conversation with the Career Center about how do I translate that experience into what grad
Yeah.
schools are looking for is a great idea.
Yes, that word translate is like the word I was looking for. It's been a long day, so I was like, what is the word I'm thinking about here?
We'll see what other questions people have while we're waiting for more questions to come in. I think we should put our colleagues on the spot here. And I'm going to ask Dr. Carter, Professor Ferguson, and Dr. Mehta, what advice would you share with students? No pressure. I know we're putting you on the spot, but what advice would you share with a student who's thinking, grad school? Maybe, I'm not sure. Professor Ferguson, would you be willing to share your advice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, my bachelor's was a lot of direction. It wasn't self-motivated. Um, and so I didn't know going into grad school, I was unsure like what I would be doing. And so I had, what I had an idea of like what my research interest would be, but I wasn't kind of really sure. Nothing was solidified. Um, that became apparent early on in my master's, but I think my advice would be to be thinking about like what is your lens? Um what is the way, what are the things that you care about, and how are you going to bring that to the research? How are you going to bring that voice to the things that you're going to be producing? Because that's going to impact like the people you cite, the things you read. It's going to impact the way you look at the things that you're assigned in throughout grad school. Grad school is kind of the time where you become the scholar you're going to be. And I think developing that lens early on will kind of help you focus and not feel like you have spent a lot of time trying to find that voice. It kind of just will help you solidify oh, I knew early on in my during my master's, I was like, oh, I am centering Black voices. I am going to be assigned texts from a lot of white scholars and white novels and all of these things, but I am centering Black voices, and I knew that from my first class. And so, even though I knew that like the things weren't going to conform to what my research interest was, having that focus and that lens made me read the things different, like made me see, oh, Moby Dick is a book about, well, obviously it's a book about racism, but like I saw Ahab in a different way. It made me find people that were talking about Moby Dick in a different way because I wasn't looking to talk about it in the same way that others were because of the way that I was focused. So that would be my advice: is just think about what you want to bring to the research and let that kind of guide you to who's going to like to find your community, that you're going to be looking for in your own research.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really love your message of figuring out what makes you you, figuring out what's important to you, and let that guide your path. We have another question in the chat, so we'll answer this question and then maybe we'll come to another professor for some advice. So Bree asks a great question. How long after it's written can a recommendation letter be used? Is it indefinite? And it'll be interesting to see if we have the same answers on this. I would say for a couple years it can be used, but once a person has written you one recommendation letter, they are your person forever. It is very easy for them to just change the date or update information. So unless it's someone who you really don't have a way of contacting, I would say best practice is if you can reach out to them once a year and ask them to update it. And usually it's just saying, you know what, I'm applying again this year. Could you just update the date? Or I've graduated now. Could you update this to reflect that I've graduated? It's really simple. Dee, what would you say?
I would say that's spot on. The only thing that I would caution you about is sometimes, and this is just something new that has come up, sometimes you have to actually put in the information, this is not cautioning maybe, but you have to put in the information of your reference and they will get a link to actually upload the document. So the main thing is like just communicate with them. So like what Anne said, like reach out to them once a year and just ask them like, are you still okay if I use you as a reference? The majority of the time they will say yes. And so that way, and then just let them know when you're using them as a reference so they don't just like get some random link and they're like, what is this? So I definitely think that once you find your people, that's your person, and that they're always a good place.
Thank you. That's such a good reminder about the automatic emails. A few other thoughts I'll share in response to Bree's question. I know when I was a student, asking for letters of recommendation was very anxiety producing. I know it can be really challenging to do. I like what Dee said earlier about building relationships with your professors, and know that if you have a relationship with a professor, if you've chatted with them after class, if you've ever stopped by your office hours, they're going to say yes to writing you a letter of recommendation. I think in the years I've been teaching, maybe the only time I've ever had to say no is exactly what Dee said. If somebody asked me and I had to say, look, you skipped my class all the time and you didn't do that well in it, and so I don't think I'd be the best person to recommend your work. But really, we want to support you, so don't hesitate to ask. Another thing I would say, in a perfect world, professors really like it when you can give us about a month notice, just because we are asked to write a lot of these. But if something comes up that you need a letter from and it's shorter than a month, ask anyway. It's up to us if we need to say, no, the timeline's too short, but ask anyway, because usually when you have a strong relationship with the professor, they're going to be willing to go to bat for you, even if it's a quick timeline. Dr. Carter, would you be willing to share some advice? These professors who came did not know we were going to put them on the spot.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't have dogs outside, but I do have a very noisy kitten. So if I have to go leave away, that's why. And I love the Melville reference, Michael. Thank you. That was awesome. I would say, and it's sort of building in a similar way on what Michael was talking about, but not quite when you're in there, but in grad school, but when you're thinking about where to go. I think that the further you go along in the educational system, the more that fit matters. I'm not suggesting that choosing the right sort of high school in town. I know that charter schools and things like that matters, but the higher you go up in the system, the more that you have to think. Like, I'll give an example. When I first applied to graduate school, I talked to professors and I said, and this was a terrible idea. I said, I just want, give me the best programs. I was thinking in that way, and I didn't get into any of them. And they all would have probably been bad for me ultimately. And so I waited, I took some years off. And then I really did research up front. So that notion of preparing, really, you may want to look at the schools and go, it's all online now. I mean, I know everyone knows that, but when I was applying, it wasn't online. But, you can find all the different professors. You may want to take a book out by them and read the introduction. You don't need to read the whole thing, but get a sense of who these people are, because the mentoring relationship is really quite important often in graduate school. And so knowing who you're going to work with and who these people are, even being able to give them a nod in your personal statement. I could imagine working with so-and-so can be very helpful. So it's that level of kind of, it doesn't have to be like the best, it's the best for you, for what you want to do and what it is that you're hoping to accomplish with the degree. So that question of fit, I think, is really key. There's a lot of different programs and they're very diverse and differentiated around the country and the world ultimately. So that's my thought. Thanks.
Thank you so much. As you think of other questions, please do either raise your hand or share them in the chat. My personal piece of advice would be really be open. When I applied for master's programs, I had the opportunity to apply for an assistantship, and I was an English major who swore up and down I was never going to be a teacher. And I actually thought, and forgive me that this sounds a bit arrogant, I thought, well, I can do a job as a teacher for a few years if it'll pay for graduate school. And as soon as I was in the classroom, I absolutely fell in love with it. So if you're interested in further education, stay open to possibilities. Dr. Mehta has shared his advice in the chat. Thank you, Sahan. He says, my 2 cents about applying to a PhD program in English. The doctorate was an incredible intellectual journey. The job market for assistant professors, however, is extremely challenging, to put it mildly. I would recommend this site as a resource on applying to grad school and beyond. And he shares the website, theprofessorisin.com. And he says, I'm happy to chat with anyone about grad school during office hours or via Zoom. And my office is in Columbine 1045. Thank you so much. Do we have other questions or other things that are on your mind that we could speak to? Dr. Carter mentioned how it can sometimes be valuable if maybe you do read up on a professor's work, giving a shout out to them in your personal statement when you apply. I'll say too, when you're working on those materials that Dee talked about, she mentioned Career Center can be a reference or a good resource for your CV. Multiliteracy Center is a great resource for putting together a writing sample and a personal statement, and your professors also. So don't hesitate to ask us, hey, I'm drafting this personal statement. Would you take a look at it with me? Or would you sit down with me and help me discuss my different papers that I've written in my courses and what might be a good writing sample? Typically, graduate schools want to see a writing sample of 10 to 12 pages. That length varies a bit, but while you are still a student, anything that you've submitted in Canvas, you can still access in Canvas. So you can go into Canvas and access all your assignments. But just like Dee said, once you graduate, you no longer have that access. So it's so important to keep those records. Okay, we have a question from Stephanie. She says, I know I want to study English, but I'm not sure exactly what I want to study, for lack of a better term. Could I go in as an English major but undecided in an area of study? So I will say, and Dee will add also, yes, there are different programs in different graduate programs in English, and really the answer is dependent on the type of program you go into. So some of them are masters in English broadly, and in the program, it works somewhat similarly to undergrad, where you'll have the choice. You'll probably be told there are some foundational courses everybody takes, and then you'll have the choice of, do I want to explore literature courses, rhetoric, professional writing courses, whatever it might be. Other programs do have specific focus areas. So if you know, I want to continue studying English, but I'm not sure in what area, then you might look for programs that are masters in English and that offer a broader range of coursework instead of say, for example, a master's specifically in literature or a master's specifically in professional writing. And Bree asks if I would be willing to expand on my experience of becoming a professor. I've heard professors typically need teaching experience, but understand you did not start in elementary or secondary. I would weighing options and would love to hear more. Thank you so much for the question, Bree. So to become a professor, to teach at the college level, it's not necessary to have K-12 teaching experience. Typically, it is necessary to have college level teaching experience to get a college level teaching job. And I know this is one of those things where we say, how do you get the experience if you can't get the job in the first place? So what my path looked like was I did go straight from a bachelor's degree into a master's degree. In my master's degree, I had a teaching assistantship. Everyone is a little different, but in my program, the first semester involved me being placed in another teacher's course where I assisted and observed and learned from her hands-on at the same time I was taking courses in theory and practice of teaching writing. And then starting in my second semester, I started teaching my own courses. And so by the time I finished a master's degree, I had a couple semesters under my belt teaching my own courses. It is possible, but tends to be rare for people to find full-time college teaching positions with a master's degree. And so when I finished my master's degree, I was not able to find a full-time teaching position in college. I started doing 2 part-time gigs. So the term often for part-time teaching work in college is called adjuncting. And I adjuncted at 2 different universities. And I also got involved working in writing centers, and that sort of set me on a path. At the time, I actually really thought I wanted to do a PhD in literature, but I started working in writing centers and learned about rhetoric and composition of a field of study with its own theoretical base. And anyway, long story short, I ended up getting a temporary position for a few years directing a writing center, and then sometime after that, started applying for PhD programs. And I really appreciate what Dr. Carter said about his own experience applying the first time around. It's very common to apply to graduate programs and not get in. The first year I applied to PhD programs, I didn't get in anywhere. And so that was a process of a couple years. And it was the exact thing that Dr. Carter said. I was aiming for status instead of really thinking about what was a good fit for me. And when I did apply for doctoral programs, I had a couple options. And one of my options was to go to a highly competitive program. I would have been funded, I would have gotten paid a great stipend, and I would have been a tiny little fish in a really big cutthroat pond, if you will. And then I also had the opportunity to go to a less competitive program where I would have funding, but I'd get paid less, but I'd be a bigger fish in the pond. And that latter one is the one I picked. And so it really was about fit for me. And then as a doctoral student, I also taught for a couple years in that program in addition to doing research. And so this may be a more detailed answer than you wanted, Bree, but I would say at each stage of my process, I was not only funneling myself toward more specialized work, but I was also gaining college level teaching experience along the way. And so by the time I was applying for jobs as an assistant professor, I had about 8 or so years of teaching experience under my belt. And the first year I did not get a job as an assistant professor, and I stayed on in a temporary teaching capacity. And then in the second year, I was able to find one. So like Dr. Mehta said, it is a pretty competitive process. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go for it. It just means it's a good idea to have some frank conversations with some people. I'll make one more comment, and then my colleagues might want to weigh in on this too. If you are someone who thinks that you'd like to be a professor someday, that often, not always, but that often means going for a PhD. And really what I would want you to know is that the PhD is a research degree. And so if deep research and deep reading and deep writing don't interest you, then a PhD probably won't be a good fit for you. The type of work that some of your professors do, like myself, does involve fairly rigorous reading and writing and research, and we love it. And so if you hear that and you think, yes, I might love to do that too, then that might be a path to pursue. There are also opportunities to be a college level educator that are more teaching focused and don't involve the research side. I know that's a very long answer. Would other people like to weigh in on that path to professorship? And maybe, thank you, Dee.
Sorry. I can say just a little bit because I also teach too. So I teach classes. So I was just gonna say don't be afraid to maybe pick up a freshman seminar class or something, that you could help students transition into college, or, if you're like, I don't know. That's just a thought. Just because that's what I love teach. I'm not a teacher by trade, but I've developed a love for teaching by teaching, freshman seminar classes, which you might have to have a master's degree for that. But just something to think about, like if you after you get done, like after you complete your master's degree, like if you still need teaching experience, those classes too might be, because they're always looking for people to teach those. So just a thought.
Thank you so much. One of the things that's really neat about employment at UCCS is that not only do faculty teach, but a lot of staff members teach. So the freshman seminar program that Dee mentioned is called GPS. And some of you who started your undergraduate career at UCCS might be familiar with the GPS program. There are also so many teaching career opportunities besides being the teacher. And I know Bree is in secondary education and will be familiar with these, but just in case others aren't, there are opportunities to be a para or a teacher's aide or a special education assistant or a tutor. And so sometimes if you're interested in teaching but not sure what that looks like, you could explore those other opportunities. Do we have we maybe have time for one more question if anyone has another burning question to ask us. And Dr. Mehta offers, in addition to what Dr. Imkuchi says, a PhD can be a very isolating experience. You're working on a specific research area that is of potential interest to few others. It's true.
I feel that to my core right now. I'm in my first semester of a PhD program, and I feel that right now. It's like it is a challenging experience in the 8 weeks that I've been doing it. So
it is. Okay, but here's something you should all know. Don't take anything we're saying as a message that you shouldn't pursue a PhD if it interests you. So the saying is, and I believe it's true, that earning a PhD is not about intelligence, it's about persistence. It is a very difficult thing to do. You are absolutely capable of going for it if it's something you want to go for. Yes, it takes a lot of hard work, as most things of value do, but I would not discourage anyone from looking into it as a possibility. And, we're happy, either Dee or I or any of the faculty on this call are happy to have conversations with any of you about it at any time. Since we are just about at time, I think I'll wrap us up. Dee and I sort of said to each other before the call started that even if only 1 or 2 students show up, this will be worth it. And we have 6 students here. So we genuinely thank you for your time, for sharing your questions, and just for being willing to spend a little time with us and learn about graduate school. Please do not hesitate to reach out at any time with any questions. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you guys. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Dee.
Thanks, Anne. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye
Thank you.
all.